Welcome to the Sentai Podcast with your hosts Sam and Jay. We're here to discuss our favorite anime, interview industry figures, and a whole lot more. Visit sentai.com/podcast to see what we're all about. Today, Jay is talking with Mandy Oquendo about cosplaying Fujiko from Lupin the Third.
Thank you for the intro, Producer Tom. And hosting today is me, Jay, events manager, all around crazy man that does everything for Sentai. And here we are talking to Mandy. Mandy. Yes, it's a Saturday here. It's a weird day, but that's okay. Mandy, how about you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh yeah. Well, as Tom said, I am a cosplayer. I do pole dance and performing. I have been an anime fan since middle school, and in the past, I was figuring it out. It's nearly like a decade at this point that I've been like particularly a Fujiko Mine cosplayer, doing various iterations of her outfits, and have been really invested into Lupin the Third, and was very happy to hear about the new series coming out. And so that is what I am here to talk about.
Yeah, so a little history about myself. I've been into anime from middle school, going to conventions since high school. So at one point early in college, I watched all of Lupin that was available, and it stayed with me since. So I had a reaction when we heard the news that we got Lupin in the office. Tom gave me a look, and I'm like, you don't understand. You new fans, you'll have it so easy now.
Yeah, it's when I got into anime, it was right at that point where like there is stuff at the Suncoast. It is prepare to pay $60 for this thing that you have never watched, and you hope that it's good.
Two episodes, 3 if you're lucky on a VHS and you're happy about it.
Yeah. And even when it comes to the Lupin the Third stuff, like fully half of the series that have come out have been in the past decade, where I really got into the series around like 2011, 2012. And it was like right before part 4 was announced and they were doing the Koike movies. And it was suddenly there was like this explosion of content, where previously, like at the point that I got in, it was only the yearly specials. And the yearly specials they're great to have. It's great to check in on these characters and see. But a lot of them, like the one that was the most recent when I got in, was the one where there's just a really ugly baby and they have to take care of a really ugly baby. And that is the entire plot, because they have to wait for a baby to poop a diamond.
I think Tom could relate to that at some point in his fatherhood career. The yearly specials hold a special place because they're like the Doctor Who specials for me. I'm gonna watch it. I don't even care if the Doctor Who season was bad this year. I'm gonna watch it because that's what I do every Christmas.
Yeah, that is something. My fiance is a big Doctor Who fan. There's a lot of like TARDISes and stuff behind me, but that was partly how I got them into watching Lupin the Third. Of like, oh hey, here's this very long running series starring this main lead who is technically the same person all the way through, but is very distinct from iteration to iteration, and is kind of defined by wearing different, somewhat obnoxious outfits. It's the same thing. They're the same.
That's a parallel I've never thought of until today, and now I will never be able to unsee it. And I hate you for this.
Yeah, it's once you have it in there of like, oh yeah, they're similar kind of things, and kind of Doctor Who has a more like somewhat connected canon than Lupin the Third does, but even then, like you can technically try to connect the canon of Lupin the Third and try to get a through line. It's just a much weirder path that you have to take.
It is the Always Sunny meme of whiteboards, corkboards, string, and crazy hair, pretty much. It's possible, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
But getting back to about yourself, which is why we're here today, of course, what was your first anime that you remember?
So I actually got in through manga first. I was in middle school. I was sitting in, I believe it was a music class, and we were waiting for the teacher to start, and the girl I was sitting next to, I was like, hey, your book is printed backwards, like the cover on it. And I thought it was something of like, maybe she found this discount place that would like sell misprinted books for cheap. And she was like, no, this is manga, and showed me that back page that is on all manga of like, stop, this is the back. Japanese manga reads right to left, not left to right. And it was Magic Knight Rayearth. And she was showing me, I was like, oh, this seems awesome. And she lent it to me, and I read it all overnight. And then at the same time that weekend, my best friend was having a slumber party, and we went over to her house. We were watching movies. We were watching like 13 Going on 30 and Sweet Home Alabama. But at some point she showed us like, oh, here's what I bought with my birthday money. And it was a bunch of Yu Yu Hakusho and Inuyasha manga. And we got to a point in the slumber party where almost everyone else has fallen asleep and I have not. And it is the worst time when you are at a slumber party and everybody else is passed out and you're just stuck there, unable to sleep. So I read a bunch of Yu Yu Hakusho and Inuyasha and got into it through there.
That can get hooks into people very, very deeply, I know, especially the other host, Sam. If you ever want to have an hour-long conversation with them, just mention Yu Yu Hakusho and they can go on and on and on. I think they may appear just because we said that.
You just say it 3 times and you summon them.
Or if I say something wrong about the canon. But then I'll be in trouble.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a lot of powerful hits, Magical Rayearth, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Inuyasha. What was the most influential anime in the beginning or at now in your fandom career, fandom life?
I mean, I would honestly kind of say for my adult life, it would be Lupin the Third, and particularly the series, The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, which was created by Sayo Yamamoto, who most people know for Yuri on Ice. But that was a series that really kind of stuck with me, and it was one of the first series that I watched for Lupin the Third. Like, I had always grown up with it kind of in the ethos of, here's like, it's a character kind of like Lum from Urusei Yatsura, where they're just always there in a lineup of anime characters. That's just someone who's always there. There was the Tokyo Pop release of manga. There were various things. So it was always just in the ether. But the actual, like, I'd seen Castle Cagliostro, but the first actual series that I had watched was The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, and it just blew me away, both in the art style and the story was actually something that really connected with me. And kind of knowing like, oh, anime can do this thing. And not only just any anime, because obviously it's a medium that can do a lot of different things, but something, this wacky series where they have episodes about how the first vampire is Jesus's twin sister, and the reason why vampires can't look at crosses is Jesus's sister just doesn't really like her brother, and so that's why they can't use crosses. But the fact that a show that ridiculous can do something like really special and really meaningful, particularly as it's kind of a story dealing with trauma and the kind of stories particularly that we have for female characters and women, it was so deeply meaningful for me. And that's kind of been a defining series for me.
That was much more powerful than I thought I was going to get, but yeah, it's hard to explain to new fans how Lupin can be from wacky races to, just a powerful drama that will gut you and mess up your entire week.
Mm-hmm. And it's something where there is kind of a through line, and those through line is the characters that are there. And because they are so much of genre archetypes, and the series has been going on for so long that later anime has been informed by those archetypes, so that these characters immediately, and you can kind of jump in. So even if they're in one episode, they're just in this loony, silly comedy, and the next thing it's something really serious and dark and dramatic. It feels very similar.
Yeah. And moving on to our next question, what was it about Fujiko that spoke to you? What made you want or need to cosplay her, as it more feels like not a want, it was a calling?
Oh, yeah. So an interesting thing about Fujiko, kind of going into the history of the original manga by Monkey Punch, is Fujiko was not a character. It was literally just a almost Bond Girl-esque pun of Fujiko Mine, Peaks of Mount Fuji. And whenever there was a female character in one of the stories that Monkey Punch was writing, because all of the stories were disjointed and disconnected, he would just name her Fujiko Mine. Regardless, it would be an entirely different character every single time. And so part of the thing that interested me was kind of taking these very disjointed traits and how do you kind of fit them into a singular character. And I've really been interested in the way that this series going on has kind of taken these little bits that we have of a character of she is selfish and she uses her appearance and her sensuality to kind of get what she wants, and is kind of the most ruthless out of the entire cast. Is the one where in the Detective Conan, one of the crossovers, she's about to shoot down a plane and Lupin's like, no, there are children in that plane. She's like, I don't care. My stuff is also in that plane.
Yeah.
Where
she's the one that most likely to mess you up and not care about it.
Yeah. And sometimes there are a lot of episodes going down to even like part 1 where it is her selfishness gets the best of her. It is kind of like leads to ruin, and they all end up losing everything because of that selfishness, which I love. I love having characters that are kind of flawed and have that kind of their defining character trait both makes them super interesting and makes them very strong and powerful, but also can totally mess up the day.
Yeah, it's also, I think, a very emotional, powerful thing about Fujiko is, as you mentioned, that she really started as a like hot girl that developed into a full-fledged, powerful character and essential to the Lupin franchise and the Lupin gang as it was.
Yeah, like the series The Woman Called Fujiko Mine is kind of a focus on her. It's a prequel series and is kind of how she links the rest of the series together. And it very much goes into kind of the stories that we have to tell about women of if a woman has to be, if a woman is using her sexuality, if she is being a very sexy person, then there must be something wrong with her. There must be a trauma or something that define that person. They have to be broken in order for that to happen. And that entire series is about subverting that and going, no, she's like this because she wants to be like this, and it's an okay thing to be, which is a very powerful thing for me. Before I actually got into cosplay, the main way that I interacted with Lupin the Third in the fandom was I did Tumblr RP, where you basically have like a Tumblr blog where you're interacting as a character and there's other people also interacting with the characters and you write stories with each other.
That takes me back.
Yeah. Which that was a thing that I had to like go back to. A lot of stories about that. That was they've recently announced they're doing a tabletop roleplay game for the series, and I was like, oh, this is great because I can kind of get that experience of what I liked of doing the roleplay game. But there's someone there who's explicitly there to give rules because Tumblr RP is a ruleless wasteland. There's just
It's
you
something.
do whatever. Yeah.
And
but
they make up their own rules as they go along, and help you if you mess up those rules.
Yeah, you get the rules once someone messes them up and is like, oh, I guess we should have had a rule for this because this was bad. But so part of it was I was writing the character Fujiko, which I kind of jumped into because there wasn't anybody else who was doing it. It was kind of an empty space. And I really like kind of getting to fill that space and really get into that character's mind. So cosplay just was kind of the next kind of step for it. Admittedly, some of it is also like she's kind of an icon when it comes to anime, is kind of the sex icon, is literally they have developed a character past the pun, but there is still obviously the pun of Peaks of Mount Fuji, and so it is a great self-esteem boost to dress up as that character, have people recognize you as that character, and be like, hey, yeah, you look like the good sexy lady. And whenever I do it, I kind of like, I am exuding Fujiko. I'm doing that in my head. The character that I actually am is Tomo from Azumanga Daioh, who there's a running gag throughout that series that she wants to be exactly like Fujiko Mine, but it's funny because she is a high schooler who is very small and flat-chested and not sexy at all. And that's what I am inside of. Outside, I'm Fujiko. Inside, I'm Tomo.
I can relate because, now I am the event manager at one of the top anime companies in the US. But inside, I'm still that little guy sitting in his room watching, Lupin the Third Part 2 for the first time by myself because we didn't have the internet like we do now.
No.
And it was on VHS too. It was expensive.
Yeah, I was fortunate that I at least got in like DVD time, so it was a little easier.
Yeah, VHS anime days were special. If you ever have a chance to see Matt Greenfield at a con, you can ask him about it, and you'll be there for a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
And you've mentioned cosplaying, Fujiko, and that's part of the reason you're here with us. What goes into creating the cosplay? Can you walk us through the steps and the, process to yourself and how you become the character?
Oh yeah, so most of the time, it just kind of starts in a flash of I see a character wear a cool outfit, and it's like, I want that cool outfit. I want that for me. Sometimes it's that character looks cool. Sometimes it's I just want to have that. And if I do it as a cosplay, then that is an excuse for me to own it. Like fully a third of the shoes that I own are just cosplay shoes that have gone cycled into my wardrobe. So when I'm cosplaying a character, first it's getting as many images that I can possibly get to fully understand what it is. And then it's having to kind of translate it because a lot of animators, unless they separately have an interest in fashion, they're not animating clothes the way that clothing actually exists. So a lot of times they have seams that make no sense. So I have to kind of figure out how the clothing is supposed to act and be worn, how it can kind of translate into a three-dimensional body. From there, I'm also trying to figure out is it something that I can kind of source where I can like go shopping either online or go to a thrift store and kind of get the materials myself, or if I need to make it from scratch. And if I need to make it from scratch, can I find a pattern that will work for it, or do I need to draft or drape a pattern myself? I went to fashion school in college, so I feel like a lot of people assume because I went to a fashion school that like, oh, you must love sewing, you must love like doing all the things. I hate it because I studied apparel industry management and apparel manufacturing. So to me, it's like, this is not cost efficient. I'm like entirely looking at like the pricing of if I get something and modify it versus if I make it for scratch. Like, yeah, the fabric materials are cheaper. Me spending 8 hours on it is not cheaper.
And never factor your own time into it. It just hurts.
Yeah. But kind of having to make those decisions, especially there's some things where I think that it's really worth it for me to make the thing from scratch or spend that time really working on it. Like, I think the last cosplay that I did like entirely where I kind of like threw up my hands and was like, I gotta make it, was when I was doing Cutie Honey. Because there are costumes that exist for it, but they were like kind of off and they didn't really look right. And I knew that like that is the sort of outfit where it's a skin tight thing and you want to make sure that it fits you specifically. And even stuff with patterns and things where it's hard to get. It is not an outfit that's actually meant to be worn by humans. So it was easier of like, I am just here. I got the fabric. I can just figure it out. Whereas something I've done for one of the Fujiko cosplay outfits that I've done is a red jacket with these patterns of, it's supposed to be like a little bullseye. And I could find a red jacket. I could find a red jacket with the trim. And I, from there, had to paint the pattern on and spend like a week or so doing that, which was its own intensive process. But it was made easier by the fact of like, at least the garment is already made and I'm not having to start at square one.
So there's a lot of tears, a lot of cursing.
Yeah, I try to, my hope is that if I plan things out far enough in advance, I can kind of figure out like, okay, here's the place where I want to spend the time. And here's the place where I kind of want to like corners. Like right now I'm working on a part 6 cosplay and there's a lot of things in the jacket design is very simple, but there's some places of like, oh, technically they have kind of drawn like princess seam here and really kind of defined it. So how do I get that defined? And for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to buy a regular leather jacket, and I'm also going to buy like zipper. Like a roll of zipper, and I can sew on zipper details and make it kind of visually interesting there, where it's not I don't think that's what they were putting it down as, but it's something that kind of gives it that pop and gives it that visual interest that was in the original drawing of it.
Definitely. It's a lot easier to draw something than it is to make it in that damn third dimension.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's also a matter of figuring out, based on my specific body type, of what works for that. Because there's some things where anime characters do not have realistic proportions. And so a lot of things like, oh yeah, that looks great on the anime character who is somehow both like 5'3", but also has 7-foot tall legs. So trying to figure out what works for me, how to like, for part 6, the main thing that I've had to figure out is typically if you buy like a motorcycle jacket, the sort of thing that she is wearing in the outfit, those aren't meant to be skin tight. But she is definitely wearing a skin tight version of it. So figure out like how I can do that and really emphasize the curves and those peaks of Mount Fuji that is so defining.
I do not envy you in this regard.
Sometimes it's kind of an on purpose thing, and even the series that I like, which was made by Sayu Yamamoto, you can definitely tell with the outfits that like, okay, this is a woman who knows things about fashion, who's picked things. It's still ridiculous character design, but it's in that kind of like, I like the fashion model, fashion illustration drawings. It's kind of going into that realm versus the like, I hate it when it's just someone of like, you're just wearing a t-shirt and shorts but you've made it skin tight and boob socky.
Like, that's not how fabric lays, but okay. So, moving on. Not that we've had many in the last 2-ish years. What is it like to cosplay at an anime convention?
Oh yeah, so I actually started cosplaying at anime conventions just because I was going to an anime convention. I figured that was the thing that you did. I had actually, so I moved to Los Angeles in 2012-ish. And I moved July 4th weekend, and I hadn't set up my coffee maker yet. So I went outside to go get some Starbucks, and I was like, why is Inuyasha here? Why is Naruto here? Why is
Did
Los
Mandy stumble
Angeles
onto
like
Anime Expo?
Yeah, I had walked into, and I just followed the line of people going to Anime Expo. And it was like, oh, I guess there is an anime convention here. But I
Little
hadn't,
thing.
yeah. Like I wasn't able to go then because I was entirely broke. And then even for the next couple of years, it would just kind of come up and I wouldn't find out until it was happening of like, oh yeah, there's that convention. So there was, like late 2014, I was like, I'm going next year. So I like bought my ticket super in advance to go in 2015, and put up like, okay, I gotta start making cosplay. I gotta start putting things together. And going, it is definitely interesting experience of particularly the characters that I tend to cosplay are not super, I mean, they're well known, but they're not the immediate thing that people recognize. So I will get a lot of guesses, particularly with Fujiko Mine. There's a joke: if you are a Fujiko Mine cosplayer, you are a Black Widow cosplayer.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which I hate because I get it, because it's just okay. Here's an outfit that is typically like a leather jacket thing. You're doing the femme fatale thing. I get it. If I'm a Black Widow cosplayer, I'm a really bad Black Widow cosplayer. I don't look good as a Black Widow cosplayer. Like, well, now you're judging my cosplay, but like, I was a good Fujiko. I'm a bad Black Widow.
It's weird because I too am a older anime fan that the animes that I will recognize without a second to glance at, and then there's this new stuff I'm like, I don't know, unless
Yeah.
it's a Sentai title, then I can tell you those all day long.
Yeah, like, and especially because there's so much of it now, where even if you are watching, like the most current season, if you're not watching that specific thing, like there are plenty. I'm not a big shonen anime person. I've kind of decided like I don't have the time to watch something that is 200 episodes, and going like week to week where you do 10 minutes of plot in 30 minutes. I can't. I love you. I can appreciate that you're doing some good stuff, but I can't do it. So I don't recognize a lot of things. Similarly, a lot of people don't recognize what I get, but it is fantastic when you can see that recognition from someone of like, oh, you are this from this specific thing. You're wearing that one outfit that was worn for 5 minutes, but it looked really cool and you're doing it and I know what it is. And that is a fantastic feeling of having kind of that recognition. Sometimes it does backfire and they get very invested that you are a character, and then you find out that they think that you're an entirely different character, and you have to break their heart a little bit of, no, I'm not that thing that you love.
Well, it's also Fujiko has influenced so much. So many characters is, a new Fujiko.
Yeah, and Fujiko itself is hard. Like, I mean, you can typically figure out when someone is cosplaying Lupin. You can figure out when someone's cosplaying Jigen. You can figure out when someone's cosplaying Goemon. Fujiko has entirely different outfits. Like, she has entirely different character designs that sometimes change through the series itself. Does not have a signature outfit. In fact, the thing that people associate as her quote unquote signature outfit, which is a leather jacket, leather pants, boots, and a red scarf, is not really a thing that she wears. Like, it's a combination of, in part one, she wears this black shirt and
That's like
jeans.
half of New York City, right?
Yeah. She wears like a black shirt and jeans and a red scarf. And then there's other times that she's been wearing like that all leather outfit. But they're not really a together thing. Like, it is mostly kind of a cosplay invention, but it has become the go-to outfit that you should wear if you want to be Fujiko.
And now we turn into the fun but also harder part where we ask you some other non-Lupin related things. So, someone says, I'm a fan of Lupin the Third. I watched the first, I watched the second. What anime title would you recommend to me now?
Well, the first question that I'd ask is, because we have talked a lot about how it's a different thing, what did you like about it? Because part of it, there's so much stuff there, and it is wildly different. And there are people who, myself included, where it's, I really like certain other things, and other things it's like, I'm not that big a fan of, which can be someone else's favorite thing. So the first thing that I want to figure out is what it is that they like so much, because there's some pretty obvious ones of, you would want to do, like, if you haven't seen Cowboy Bebop already, you should see Cowboy Bebop, because it's literally just Lupin the Third in space. You should watch Michiko and Hatchin, which is technically is a derivation of Cowboy Bebop, but here's Lupin and Zenigata, but they're women. If you like the silliness and the wackiness of it, I'm a big fan of Osamatsu-san. And just kind of those silly antics, and particularly an old school style, but that is a series, because it is more modern. It is kind of commenting on how to be an old anime in the modern era. There's a lot of places where, if you like a specific creator or you like the specific thing of it, the thing that I recommend is, okay, look who created it, because they are likely, it has been 20 or 30 years since they've done that, and they've probably done a bunch of other things since there. So it's like, do a little searching on your favorite thing, and you will find your favorite thing. I mean, like, Hiroyuki Imaishi did one of the openings for one of the specials, and that is a bunch of places. And you can immediately tell when it is him doing it, because they just suddenly turn into Kill la Kill, where they're like all very jumpy and bouncy.
Definitely. If I was to give some recommendations, I would probably start with Outlaw Star, because it's Lupin in space.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would also say Get a Robo, because I've been watching Get a Robo Arc, because it's one of our simulcasts, and it's like giving me that old school vibes that I need before Lupin starts. Which that doesn't make sense, because this is coming out way later than the season. Thanks, Tom. So
you're welcome.
Oh yeah, where's the fun facts, Tom?
Fun facts. Well, it'll be a surprise if there are fun facts today.
It'd be fun facts for me. There are no fun facts.
Well, that might be it. We'll just wait.
Fun facts.
See.
Fun is over.
So my next question, and this is a hard one, but my answer is always right. Animes that wrecked you, that made you cry, that just ruined you.
So there are a lot of things. Partly it's something of, I tend to get emotional just when a series is ending. If there's something where I have watched a lot of it, I have got invested in these characters, and then they do the thing in the final episode where they play some music, and it's all getting toward the end. I'm just going to get emotional regardless. I think some recent series that were kind of like made to make me upset, or made to wreck me, were Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season. That is if you have ever been a girl in middle school or high school, that is a series specifically designed to come for you and completely destroy you. After the Rain is one. Obviously, I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to keep mentioning it, of The Woman Called Fujiko Mine. That is a series to the point of, it is very emotional. It's very cathartic. I have to put gigantic trigger warnings on it of, again, it talks a lot about abuse and trauma. So it can be a show that is a lot, and you kind of have to know it going in. I feel like that emotion is worth it, but that is a series that will wreck me. I connected a lot with the Tatami Galaxy is a series that came out when I was just about to start college, and so much of it is about college life and the idea of this is supposed to be the best time of your life, so you have to make the most of it, and then constantly being unable to do that, which is if you have anxiety, that sure is a feeling that will come back.
That's a little too close to home, Mandy. You need to dial it back a little bit. So my recommendation, I think a lot of anime fans just block this out because it's so traumatic, is Grave of the Fireflies.
Oh, yeah. That's like, almost feel like that's one of the, like, you go in knowing that you're going to be like, oh yeah, it's World War II. You're going to like, I could bring up Barefoot Gen. I own Barefoot Gen. I've watched it once. I will never watch it again because I don't need to traumatize myself again.
Yeah. I've seen it plenty of times. It's one of our titles. I've seen it in theaters, and I'm like, every time, why did I do that again? It's rough, and it's still beautiful, but I don't plan on watching anytime soon.
No.
I'm the guy who's watched the Reg Nanachi MIDI scene like 11 times, and it still wrecks me every time. And Made in Abyss. Oh my goodness.
Made in the Abyss. I mean, Mob Psycho even gets me like very emotional. That is again something, if you are a person who deals with anxiety and deals with kind of your emotions kind of getting overwhelming. I am an autistic person, so I deal with kind of like meltdowns and burnout and things like that. And to the point of I had to describe the anime to my therapist of this is how I feel sometimes. If I can just feel that ticker, and I'm just going to stop being a person once it gets to a certain level.
So you meet a friend roughly your age. They have never watched anime before. They like very pop culture things. They Big Sky and, whatever, the normal broadcast shows that I don't know because I don't own a television service anymore because that's life now. What anime do you recommend them?
So honestly, that does kind of depend on what it is in those series that they do like. Typically, because I have definitely run into people where they have not watched anime. They're not into those kinds of things. And I want to figure out not only is like, what is the regular things that you like, but also anime has been a huge part of pop culture. You have likely seen it. What is the reason that you have not got into it? I feel like that's an important thing because there's some people where you have a perception as to what anime is, and I don't want to show you more of that perception. So if it's something of my old roommate was super into The Bachelor. The Bachelor franchise got me into it. And I was like, oh, The Bachelor is just an American harem anime. So I'm going to be showing you, I'd probably ease you in of like, I'm going to give you Ouran High School Host Club because that's kind of a deconstruction of the harem anime.
Can throw in some Fruits Basket.
Yeah, we're going to get like into Fruits Basket. Like, I'm not going to dive in with Monster Musume, though there have been people that I have been like, okay, Monster Musume is the thing for you, of you kind of like schlocky, kind of like horror slasher things. Like you kind of want like the B-movie stuff that Joe Bob Briggs is going to have a movie about.
They like trash, as the kids say.
Yeah. And be like, okay, we're going to give you some Monster Musume of like, what if instead of it being horror, you got to kiss them? Like, yeah, we're gonna kiss them. So it's always kind of a place of it really depends on where things are. It's a great opportunity getting to talk to people now who are big Star Wars people but aren't big anime people, because that Star Wars Visions just came out and there have so many creators of, one of them is literally Promare, but I made it Star Wars. So I was like, okay, well, if you thought that one looked cool, how about the one that is just Promare then?
If they loved The Mandalorian, give them Trigun.
Yeah. If they love the live action Cowboy Bebop, give them Lupin the Third.
I mean, I wasn't going to go there, but you can go there. So you seem very, used to podcasting and this cadence and trying not to interrupt each other when we're not in the same room, which is always fun. And how did you get started with your other podcast? And feel free to plug away right now.
Oh, yeah. So my other podcast is Out on Her Fanny, a podcast about the nanny. And it honestly started as something where I moved in with at the time, my partner, and they have YouTube TV, which means that we can actually get some broadcast TV, which is something that I missed because I missed just being able to like flip through TV channels and find something just to put on. I'm not watching it. I just want to put it on in the background while I do other things. And we found there's this channel, Cozy TV, that constantly plays The Nanny. And I grew up with The Nanny back in elementary school. There would just be random episodes of it on in syndication. So I would watch it. And then I was watching a lot of it. And my partner would typically be sitting at the computer, not watching it, but listening to it and finding like, oh, hey, this is a much smarter TV show than I figured it would. My partner is a writer. They're also English, so they're used to a lot more like English comedy. So they have certain opinions about American sitcoms, in particular, like American sitcoms of this era. So they were kind of surprised to see like, oh, hey, this isn't bad. There's a lot of like really smart humor in this. And so as a gift, they actually got me the DVD box set of The Nanny, and I started watching that, and we were continuing to kind of talk about it and discuss things. And it was like, I want to make a podcast. I think that we need to put a microphone between us while we do these conversations. And so we just decided to do it. It was actually perfect timing because literally like 2 or 3 days after we said, hey, we should do this podcast, HBO Max announced that they were going to put it on streaming. So we decided, okay, when they're going to drop it April 1st, we're going to start our podcast on April 1st, which did cause a lot of people to think that we were making a joke and that it was a joke podcast. I'm like, no, the podcast is real. The joke is on us for having to do this thing when the both of us are very busy. But we both talk about it. My kind of pitch is the show is somewhat a romance between an American and an English person. My now fiance is English. I'm American, so we can kind of bond over it together. The Out on Her Fanny is definitely, we were bouncing names back and forth, and it was like, we can't call it Out on Her Fanny, which is a line in the
opening.
A line in the opening theme, because every time that it goes, since my partner is English, and here fanny means your bottom, means your butt. In England, that means your front. So every time they're like, she fell out on her vagina. So we literally end the podcast every week by going, yes, we do know it means vagina.
Do you have that conversation every time you're in the car? The boot, the trunk, the boot, the trunk.
Nowadays, it's mainly a thing of, it's not different words, but it's pronunciation of words, of asking them to say pastor and pasta, because those words sound exactly the same in an English accent, I have found.
My Canadian friend, or she's British, but she lives in Canada, aluminium.
Yeah, aluminium.
And I'm just like, that's wrong. That's just wrong.
Yeah, and there's some things, because they've lived in the U.S. for like 12, 15 years. You can tell that they were never a sports person because they refer to soccer as soccer. It's like, well, football never came up, and y'all stare at me confused when I say football, so I'm just going to say soccer.
I could talk about this for a long time because I spent a lot of time with my Canadian British friend. But with that, I want to thank you again for joining us Mandy, it's been a pleasure, and I hope we get to talk to each other again, which we might, because I don't know if I can mention New York on here, Tom.
I don't know either. We'll figure it out.
No, just cut that part out. Before we sign off and Tom does his wonderful outro without saying a fun fact, Mandy, where can people find you online?
Oh, yeah. You can find me Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Mandy Quesadilla. That is Mandy, and quesadilla like the food that you get from restaurants. I was going to say Taco Bell, but I was like, well, technically you could hopefully get it from places that aren't Taco Bell.
Hey, 3 a.m. Taco Bell quesadillas. Great.
Yeah. It's its own special thing. You can also find our podcast at Out on Her Fanny. That is also on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find our website at oofcast.com. That is oohfcast.com, because we were worried that if we put Fanny in the URL that Google would hide it.
Solid concern.
All right, Mandy. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Sentai podcast. It was absolutely a pleasure to have you on today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Sentai podcast. This episode was brought to you by High Dive, where you can stream thousands of hours of anime, including Lupin the Third, Part 6, for $4.99 a month. Check out highdive.com for details. Special thanks to our guest, Mandy Oquendo, our host, Jay Perez, our producer, Tom Helberg, and our audio engineers, Ricardo Contreras and Brent Marshall. Thanks for tuning in.